everybody. I'm Paul Vivian. I'm actually based right now in Salford, so near where Alice comes from. And the reason why I'm here is because I'm also an academic as well. I work at the, I started a new job actually while we were all in lockdown at University of Salford. So I'm the Director of Art and Design there. And I've been an artist really, I suppose, since 1993. I studied at painting at Chelsea, and it was really interesting times because it was a very kind of heavy duty abstraction, sort of post abstraction, I suppose. We were all made to paint, and we were all made to paint squares and geometric kind of work. And the thing that kind of came across that I got most interested in was this idea of kind of reductive, was about the way that abstraction is reductive, that you can break down. So I was very interested kind of in that, but it took me a long time to kind of get to the work where I am, that I'm making at the moment. So I'm going to try and screen share so that I can get to my website. I bet this isn't going to work for me. Anyway, here we go. Oh no, maybe it will. Let's see. Oops. Oh, yeah, that's okay. Great. Okay. So what I'm going to try and do is not necessarily speak, I might speak about individual works, but I just wanted to talk really about the process. And so I started with, saying that I began as a painter. And what I would do as a painter is take a subject or an idea and kind of try and reduce it down to just a series of gestures, really, which will either be kind of geometric or expressive or whatever. And it took me a long time to realize that's what I was really doing. I was kind of, when you're a painter, sometimes you can get very caught up in a whole history of painting, the weight of the history of painting. And I certainly had that experience, I suppose. So after a while, about 15 years, I managed to I stopped painting basically. And I started to be much more interested in images and objects, I suppose. And I slowly began to kind of work towards this sort of work that you're seeing on the screen. And the best way to explain it, it's a very kind of, in a way, a sort of simple equation, really, which is that you take a large idea, concept, or experience, and then you take an object or a thing, and you host that big idea within a small thing. And that's what I kind of got interested in. And the reason for that really was the way that spectacle in our lives, in the world, gets kind of reduced. Sometimes the first way that we see something dramatic or an event is obviously through images and through moving images or through still images. And there's something about the way that as we begin to see the experience, which maybe we've not had ourselves, it becomes reduced until it becomes kind of either entertainment or sometimes decoration or a good example of this. I know this is a bit weird, but I was watching an episode of Peep Show. And in the episode of Peep Show, one of the main characters is being asked to buy a T-shirt with Churm and Mao on it. And his girlfriend is saying, this is really cool, and he says, hang on a minute, he killed, so many millions of people. And so that idea that spectacle or events become good and bad get kind of reduced down through all these sort of processes. So a lot of the work operates in a way like that. And this is an example. This is a piece called Meteor, which is it's a printed towel, basically. So it's a photo print onto a towel. So it's done in a kind of commercial way, and it's an average kind of size beach towel. And a lot of my work is also influenced by subjects which are not necessarily coming. They probably are a reflection of me, but they're also things that kind of are very insistent and persistent on me, and somehow I find myself building a relationship with those subjects. So it can be anything from film, it can be something that I've read, on it a kind of something that is historical or is myth or whatever it might be. And this this piece of work comes from a film called Deep Impact, which is a Hollywood disaster movie, actually. And in the film, there is a meteor which is coming to hit Earth. This terrible kind of event that we all sort of dread, but Hollywood seems to like replaying to us the idea of disaster. You always see in Hollywood that, you know, cultural centers get blown up first. It's always New York, France, or London, or whatever it might be, you know. And in the final scene of this terrible, terrible event is a reunion between a father and a daughter, and they're on the beach, and they finally embrace. While this, as they embrace, and you have this wonderful reunion of these this family that's been separated, they are hit by a huge tsunami wave, which has been made by a meteor. So it's really crass and silly in a way, you know, with that. So anyway, so that kind of was persistent. It was something I used to watch disaster movies with my son. So I'm not saying I'm a great parent, but that's what we used to do, was watch that sort of thing. So it kind of stuck, and it stuck. And that sort of idea of persistence of something is really important. But some of the work ends up like this, looking almost like merchandise. You'll see in a moment, but I've had an exhibition which literally opened and closed immediately on the day that Boris said that was it, we must all lock down. And, no more. I know, it's sad, isn't it? So it's now in this space in Southampton, which is this new art centre they've created down there, and nobody can see it, which is slightly bizarre. But you'll see some images of that, and I've actually got a video if we've got time. I'll quickly play it. I don't think it's that long. So I'm interested. So I kind of, again, you know, a lot of my influences are very, very broad. A lot of them come from kind of popular culture, but also I have kind of interest in things like objects and imagery from, say, the occult. But I'm not an occultist, and I'm not someone who, you know, practices that, or I read about it, but only in a way of at a distance. And what I'm much more interested in is the way that these objects are presented in museums, and how suddenly have they lost their power? Has their power been taken away because they're in a museum? So there's a kind of there's an object which is in Oxford, which is an object which I think is called a ladder. And the idea is it's a piece of rope with duck feathers attached to it. And this is actually a curse. It was found in an attic in Somerset in the late 1800s, supposedly surrounded by brooms and stools. I don't know whether I believe that or not, but the idea is that this thing was a curse, but it's the most beautiful sculptural object in the world. It's an amazing thing. And so I just got very interested in the sort of symbolism, or the potential to empty out the symbolism of something that was quite strong. So I made this pentagram from snooker cues, and it ended up going into an exhibition as part of a group show called Absinthe 3, the drink, and in London. And they made it really dark and mysterious, and it kind of ended up sort of heightening the ridiculousness of the object, I think. So I kind of I suppose in a way what it repeated back to me was this idea of humour that's very important in my work. And this is just to talk about process, because when I was putting some notes together for this, I was thinking, okay, what on earth am I going to say? And my work isn't really led necessarily by materials first. I don't think of like a process and think, oh, I'd love to work in that. It has to be driven by, again, this idea of a persistent idea. But one of the processes that I use an awful lot, these are casts. So they're sculptural casts. This is a cast of a pebble. And then what I do is I repaint it. So I make it look like the real thing, but adapt it slightly. And this is a piece called Anarchy Stone. And it's the idea that it's the first stone thrown from a barricade in Paris in 1848. Of course, it's not the first stone thrown from a barricade, but I quite like that idea of, you know, you might walk on the beach, and you might have done this, you know, yourselves or with families, and you walk on a beach and you'll pick up a stone, and it's that moment of pareidolia where you see something in the stone that, oh look, it looks like a face, or oh look, it's a P or a PV or whatever it might be. And I really like this idea of, so I created this kind of fiction of picking up this stone, this idea of this anarchy symbol. You can see the A and then surrounded by that. And then again, it being this kind of echo of this moment in time. And of course, the thing about this stone is it can't really be thrown because it's this crafted object, perhaps. It would just, and if it did, it would just break up and become, you'd see the plaster inside and all sorts of things. So I kind of, this idea of artifact, I suppose, and relic is something I guess I'd be interested in that. Again, going back to, this is a piece, quickly, I didn't say I was going to talk about the work, but I guess I am a bit, so apologies. But this is a piece which is based on Dr. John Dee, who was, he was Elizabeth I's kind of sort of go-to guy for sort of looking at the star. If she was going to make a decision, he'd look at the stars or play around with materials and tell her whether, you know, it was a good idea or not. And this is a thing called a scrying mirror. So it's where spirits would, you would do an incantation into this mirror and then spirits would emerge out of it. And it's actually in the British Museum, the original. But this is a remake that I made of dyed silicon. So basically I got silicon medium and then dyed it black. And so what you have is this kind of ridiculous rubber mirror, which is the mimic of the original one. But of course, it's kind of mute. It's never going to work. It's never going to be magic. It's never going to sort of do what Dr. John Dee's mirror was supposedly did. So it's kind of this idea of a sort of an impression of something, like a kind of a parody of it in some way, I suppose. So that idea of silencing things also interests me, I suppose. I don't know. Maybe with that. So this is from this exhibition which nobody can see, that's on at the moment. And these heads, by the way, I don't know if anybody recognises them, but they're called boson heads, and they were made in Stoke from about from the 1920s onwards until about the 1990s, actually. And I was brought up in North Devon by the sea. And you'd see these heads in all these gift shops all the time. And these were actually lifeboatmen. So this was from a show called Those Who Look Out and Those Who Look Back, which is still on at the moment with Laura Eldridge. And hopefully it's going to open once restrictions are eased even more with this. But it was our responses really to ideas about the sea. And because Southampton is a port city in the south, and God's House Tower, which is where the exhibition is, was formerly a jail. It was also a kind of a defense. So that's where the army would kind of, is that right? Yeah, army or navy would kind of protect the city from the Spanish. And so we had to do this response, really. We both, and so Laura's work is really looking out, and then my work is kind of looking back. That's the sort of gist of it, really. And so I made these towels, which are these prints of sea swells, and this is a huge towel which is about 6 feet by 7, something like that, on the floor. And then these boson heads, there's about 30 of them. This is another piece from the show, which is this idea of water droplets. It's actually from a window screen in my car. So it's kind of this thing which immediately, you know, has perhaps romantic connotations, but was actually made in a very kind of very, very simplistic sort of way. I can quickly play the video just so you get an idea of the show. Maybe I can move it on a bit if it'll play. I don't know. So that's another piece, which is this pebble towel piece. And that's Laura's work behind in the video. And these are the heads all around. And there's a T-shirt, which you'll see in a moment, I think. Which is there. So that's the same image as the towel piece. So it's an amazing space. It's this old medieval building, and you can't do anything to the walls. You know, you can't attach anything to the walls. So you had to kind of work around all those sort of typical problems, really, of trying to, you know, curate within spaces like that. But it's great, really good space. So yeah, so these are kind of, you know, again, sort of, there's this very famous image of Earthrise by from the Apollo 11. It's the one of the, you know, the blue pearl of our planet coming over the moon, and this is a half sort of bitten digestive that I've cast in plaster and then remade, so repainted, and this sits on the wall. So it's a kind of visual joke, really, that it kind of mimics the original image, and it's also about going. I mentioned earlier about pareidolia, about seeing things, say, in the clouds. You know, you see a horse in the clouds or whatever it is. And to me, I'm fascinated by pareidolia, but it's also that thing of kind of the way that an idea can impress itself onto something which is so separate from it entirely. So the heart, like a child does, you know, a child would hold up a biscuit and say, oh, look, mummy or daddy, there's the moon, you know, or whatever it might be. So that kind of, I love that sort of innocent vision, but giving it a really substantive idea. So I'll just flick through some of these. This is another one, which is about, again, my obsession with meteors, probably in Hollywood films. This is a Kursk, which is the Russian submarine. It's a terrible kind of tragedy, but reduced down to this courgette. But the idea, but again, it's cast and remade. All of these things are kind of remade. This is Moon, which is using a shaving mirror and then a spotlight. This was from an exhibition at Exeter Phoenix Gallery in, was it 2000? Yeah, 2012. Oops. And then these are made from blue tack. So they're only about a sort of inch, really. And they're a series called Middlemen. And it's a lot of, my father was a bit like this. My father was a major alcoholic. And when he would get drunk, he'd sort of stick his tongue out and make horrible noises. And so I just started making these gurning, ridiculous men, basically. Middle-aged men, middlemen. There we are. And so you get these things, and it's kind of this idea that they're almost missed. That's what I quite like. I quite like with some of my work, like the biscuit, that you could miss it. It might disappear back into the world and never be seen again, never be art, you know. So this is a piece that I did, which was eventually shown at this show that I talked about in London, Absinthe 3. And it's a remake of Hokusai's Mount Fuji prints, which I love. But again, impressing it onto a snooker cue. So just a silly, ridiculous thing. These aren't real fries, they're remade fries. And this is a kind of tribute to Aleister Crowley. Again, a ridiculous kind of thing, really. Just the shuffling together of, you know, when you're in a conversation at the pub and you're kind of moving stuff around, you're fidgeting because you know you've got to go in 5 minutes, and you make something silly. I quite like that sort of idea, really. This is a bronze piece, which is called San Damiano Cross. That's the cross that St. Francis saw, and he turned to God in that moment with that. And it's actually packing tape. So it's a cast of kind of packing tape made into, eventually made into bronze. This is a cast as well of a kids club with biros coming out of it. This is a silk tie piece that I made called Knot a while back. These are a series of potatoes called Spectre. And I really love this idea, you know, again with pareidolia, you pick up a potato and you see a face in it, something kind of. And so I did this for an exhibition again in London, which was all these sad potatoes looking disappointingly at anybody that came in. There's a whole load of those that are remade. So it's clay. These are made in clay and then painted up. This is a remade paper plane. So I wanted to take something that could be just chucked away and was very simple and made through kind of absent-mindedness or boredom. And this is a like perfectly reconstructed thing that all these creases are made by something called it's called a creaser. Basically, before machines would make cards, they'd use these creasing, handheld creasing things. So I've got this thing. And these are all just fine line marker lines, and this is all cut by hand. All this kind of thing. So ridiculous amount of effort for nothing. That's the idea, really. Nothing, no thing. Oh, I'm going to go in a moment. Right. This is a Leslie Van Outen, who was one of the Manson girls from the terrible Charles Manson kind of thing. And there's very famous images of the girls as they're in court and they're smiling. And it was really horrifying. And I wanted to kind of make this sort of replicate that, but I did it with bread. And again, this is a cast of a slice of bread with this ridiculous kind of image on there. This is a box of matches called Pub Fire. It's got collage on it. I love collage. Collage is something I've always been very, very interested in with that. So this was shown at the Jerwood Drawing Prize. And I think that's the only time it's been shown, this particular piece. This is a print called Vampire, which is, I basically put it through my domestic printer and then did a very simple thing, whipped it out. And then by accident, unfortunately, it has this strange emerging image over the top of whatever that is, you know, a roof. This is a piece called Hour of the Wolf. It's children's jacket with sequins. It's based on a film called The Wanderers. And The Warriors, sorry, which is about New York gangs, and they're all wear these insignia on them, but I kind of like the idea of this kids gang with this insignia of the wolves on the back. This is called Prop, or Hold Back, sorry, and it's promotional image of Sylvester Stallone held back with brooms and snooker cues. So it's kind of masculine, it's kind of taking the mick out of masculinity, really, messing around with that. This is a bronze piece called Mono Curse, which in brackets Keith Moon. So working with that, trying to encapsulate an individual in one kind of thing. This is called Islands. Again, shaving mirrors again up here. And this is actually 1970s wallpaper that used to be able to put on doors of kitchens. They were deliberately made. It was deliberately made to put on doors of kitchens to create glamour in in your apartment or your flat. I actually remember these. You know, I am a child of the 70s, but I was quite young then. But anyway, but yeah, so it's great, really cool wallpaper. But then I used it for this here. And this is called And Then I Saw the Best Jesus Ever. This is quite an early piece, sort of 2016. The best Jesus for me was Robert Powell in Jesus of Nazareth. And in this coffee cup, he's at the bottom of a coffee cup painted in coffee with that as he kind of stares out. This was at a show in Mayfair, which was a disaster. It was in this, it was in the hotel which was formerly the Playboy Club. And it's changed now. It's called Park Lane, 45 Park Lane. And after I'd installed the work, they removed all the works. They took it away because they thought this was offensive to the clientele. So I had to then have it re-shown in this sort of private room. It was just the most bizarre show, really. Anyway, but that's that piece there. And this is called Crouching Billionaire Ghost, which is a kind of sort of safety blanket, and it's got I don't know if I can zoom in on that. So it's got these kind of collaged eyes on it, this hiding figure underneath there. And then we're back to that. And that's me. I'll just go back. How can I stop it from being shared? Oh no. Okay.
Thank you. That was really great.
Okay.
So we've got 6 minutes left. So apologies to ask everybody to come back in after that time. But I was thinking with the printed towels where you've got the water prints on them. I just made me think of Lawrence Wiener's work, Water Made It Wet, and that kind of like of pun. I don't know, it just popped into my head. Are you familiar with?
Yeah. I'm familiar with Lawrence Wiener, but not that piece. Yeah.
I think I think he might have installed it in Salford or Manchester at some point. I don't quote me, I could be wrong, but I just thought with the kind of using the images of water on something that was to kind of like mop water up or to remove
absolutely
water, that kind of like literal like flippancy almost, and like water made it wet. Of course it did. That kind of I just thought there was like something really nice about that kind of those two works that are very different, because his work is text-based mainly, isn't it?
That's right. Yeah.
The modes of work are very diverse, but almost like so that popped into my head.
Great.
But I was really interested in like the reason you did. I think you did mention it about the ridiculous amount of effort going into nothing, but the reason why, rather than showing things like the biscuit as it is, the half
as a biscuit,
why you chose to cast and then paint it, which like I said, you kind of answered it in making the ridiculous amounts of work. But I wondered if you could talk a bit more about that and choosing to use so many laborious processes rather than using the original objects.
I think because it's like I'm very interested in that idea of mimicking and the idea of imitation. I really love the idea of something that is so looks so immediate. I was saying about Marina's work that it's like cramming, kind of energy into one sort of space, and that's what in a sense you could argue from an art historical perspective, that's what the ready-made is that urgency. Just do it. Just get it out there. And I like the idea of kind of playing with that. In a way, the sort of joke is then on me, comes back on me because of this kind of laborious effort. And I don't, it's funny because I don't enjoy like remaking, it's not something I sit there and, I don't, it's really painful. And I'm a perfectionist when I make those works, and and so I kind of I sort of punish myself a little bit with it, really, and I think that idea of permanence it interests me. That the biscuit would eventually perhaps go off, maybe not, I don't know, but it might start to decay, and it might get eaten by somebody maybe, which could be good. So I think that I've always been interested by when you have the kind of wow factor of art, that you look behind the curtain and see the artifice behind something, and I think the laborious effort versus the immediacy is something I'm kind of quite I can't seem to get away from. I'm not brave enough to just do it. That's the thing. So yeah. Bit cowardly, really. I've just realised.
It's something that I can relate to in that sort of laborious process. It's something that I often use in my sculptural work, of doing repetitive processes that I don't particularly enjoy them to start with, but I end up really hating them afterwards, like sharpening thousands of pencils. It's like, why am I putting myself through this pain?
Yeah, that's exactly it.
I don't know. Maybe it's like the resultant process is something to sit back and go, you know, you've put so
At
much
least
effort
you
into
put
it.
effort in.
Yeah, but maybe it's something to do with that. I don't know.
Yeah, no, very interesting. That sort of idea of almost punishment in a way. But I think that sense of it, I suppose it's also looking for that sense of achievement in something. I don't know. But yeah,
or that sense of that legitimacy of the idea. The idea is more weighty if you put all that effort into it.
Yeah. I think it also goes back to that idea of persistence that I was talking about, the way that a subject nags you. And for me, it nags over a very long period of time. And maybe that's one of the reasons why I then invest either time or finance into something. I don't know. I'm not sure. Like, it's got to be worthy of that, of now repaying that effort.
Yeah, get it out of the system through process.
Yeah. And it's really painful. I'm working on a piece at the moment that's almost been 2 years so far, kind of nagging away, and I can't get it right. It's really hard, you know, to make a correct response to that, you know.
Just talking about the aeroplane, and I didn't quite follow the cutting. You said it was a very precise cutting machine you used for that.
Oh no, there's a tool that I use which is called a creaser. But it's not a very imaginative name for it, and that's what it literally is. So it's a plank of wood. You can get varying degrees of metal kind of inserted into it, and then you have a plastic, what should I say, kind of handle or something that then goes onto you put the paper down over the metal, and then you can pull and create a perfect crease. So a friend of mine very kindly invented this thing, or kind of made a variation on it, and then gave me this, and I finally got to use it sort of 6 years later,
right,
or quite a bit later. But so basically that particular piece, which ended up going to I think it was a show in Galway, and the whole thing is recrafted. You know, it's this idea that even the pulls, you know, when you pull on in a pad, that everything is then reconstructed. And that was quite a sort of early. I made a second version of it, but the first version, which is pretty much identical, is kind of illustrating that point I was making to Alice about putting yourself through a kind of punishment, almost a kind of quite painful recreation, because it was really agonizing. I got when you are cutting with a scalpel and you're really precise, you can I slit the tops of my fingers, but on the back of the blade, all that kind of silliness, you know, suffering. That's what it was. Yeah. So yeah, but it's funny you said about it being cast, because the parcel tape piece, which was a bronze.
Yeah, amazing.
It was that process was they did that for the first time at the foundry at where I was working in my former university. And it ended up going to the Royal College of Art at this international conference, kind of held up as this sort of example. I mean, I came up with the idea, but they did all the magic, you know, for it. But that was pretty amazing.
I'd love to see that one closer. It would be nice to see a more detail of it, a close-up. Yeah,
you can. I think on the website you can zoom in or something on there. Maybe.
Okay, I'll have a look.
But yeah, it is. It's clever. Yeah. How they got around the technical problem is amazing. Yeah. With that.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, it's good.
Great.
I wanted to ask about the process of the duo show that you had. Was it?
Oh yeah.
How did the duo show come about? Did the gallery put you together? Did you have existing ideas that kind of like formed through dialogue? What was the process of how that?
It's a really, really interesting one, because do you know Laura Eldritch's work? No. I don't know if anybody does. So it's a very much socially engaged practice, and she runs a group called More Than Ponies, which is the New Forest. It's set in the New Forest, and we were selected to be the first group of artists in this art centre. So it was a national. Well, it wasn't. It was a national call out, but an emphasis on regional artists for within the Southwest. And I got selected along with Laura. The idea was we were all supposed to have a solo show, and the rule was that it should be in response to the sea, in response to these 19th century paintings, which were by a family called Pevers, who created these romantic English landscapes. You know, you can sort of imagine what they were like, moonlight, you know, with fishermen. But they were all outside. They were all paintings of this God's House Tower, this medieval, you know, tower. So we were all anticipating a solo show, and I was really excited about that because I thought, okay, it's a good chance after a few years to road test, you know, a dialogue between works. And then we were put into a group, you know, into groups, and I got Laura. Well, she got me, and I got her, kind of thing. And I was really kind of terrified because my work isn't really about social engagement. You know, it's very traditional in a way. I still hold on to that idea of, you know, the individual looking at the thing or connecting with the thing or the image or whatever it is. So I'm quite boringly traditional in a weird sort of way, whereas Laura was always engaging with community groups, and sort of she got like sea shanty choirs who were all these sort of 80, 90-year-olds in Southampton that would go and sing sea shanties just for fun in the evenings, you know. And she was doing all of this kind of work with that, and I was sort of dreading it, if I'm honest. I thought I don't know how this is going to fit. And sometimes you can look at a collaboration and get very excited because, of course, you see links. You know, you go, oh my God, I'm going to learn so much, you know, and I couldn't for the life of me see this link. And then we met, and it was amazing. It was like we just hit it off straight away. And we realized that we had the same interests. And of course, my way into her work was like Bajyanada. I started talking about In Search of the Miraculous, which was his piece of work where he sailed across the Atlantic Ocean and used sea shanties as well, and sort of old 60s records like Searching were part of that, you know, it's kind of thing. And we kind of made this connection, and it really was for the first time in a long while, I was having this real proper dialogue with somebody about building towards this show. So it was a lot of compromise and a lot of kind of critique as well. It was a bit like, you know, this sort of experience where sometimes well, as we know within a crit, you know, sometimes you can present something and somebody just makes a face, or, you know, like when you're back at art school and you go, oh my God, you know. And that was what it was a bit like with Laura. There were a few times when I would present an idea and all she needed to do was kind of go like this. And then that was it. I realized that wasn't going to work. And the same thing back to her. You know, she would say, I'm going to do this. Like you mentioned about the Lawrence Weiner work, which I can't wait to have a look at. But I was going to wet those towels, and they were all going to be hanging up, dripping throughout the show. So some poor sort of invigilator was going to have to keep dipping them in water to bring it up, you know. And we was kind of going with that for a long time. And then Laura kind of at one of the meetings kind of said, you know, no, I think you've got to make it dry and actually just go with the image, you know, on there. But she was, yeah, it was really amazing. But it came through dialogue. It came through words. It wasn't even about sharing our particular passions as such, but it kept being about this interpretation of the core subject, which was water. So I might have started with Bajyanada, but that's because I'm an art head. That's my way of sometimes getting a grip on something with that. And she, yeah, so it was a use of words, and we would bring text and quotes, you know, and poems and things like that. So it was really good for me. because I was able to kind of relinquish a lot of my what I thought was authority with my work was suddenly given over to somebody else. So yeah, it was definitely a really good experience. Yeah. But I ought to add, I didn't think it was going to start out like that.
Yeah, that sounds really great.
Yeah, no, it was good. It was really good. Yeah.
Any other questions or sorry?
Yeah, like I have a comment. I think it's very interesting how you work with this historical way, and also like all the historical thoughts which just jump in. And I don't know if it's where I'm from, or maybe like I just create a lot of notes like I need to learn about this, I need to to learn about that. And I think it's very interesting and also very powerful for someone what is out. Of course, we watch a lot of thousands of produced movies here, but many times you say about specific situations that, yeah, okay, so maybe that's really interesting for me too. And I think also the biscuit, the one you say, like the kind of moan, and also the moan with the shaving, it's very cool. Like I love the shaving mirror reflection, and also the image with the landscape is terrific. I really like. And but I think that kind of the moment in a sense, and how you put also your son, like should it be a good father teaching these disaster movies? I don't know, I think you should work with this more. No, but it's perfect. I think you should work with this more. I really like when something, it's more than just something in the wall. Like I know like all the art have something behind, especially from the artist, but many times it's not shining enough. But I think as your art as much is reduced, like you say it, and reduced and simple, and also you can see something behind, and that's very interesting. And I think like for me, if I can say, this is always also very powerful. I really like, I'm really glad to work here, and yeah, it's really good to have the opportunity.
Well, it's funny. I mean, there's a quote from Jean-Luc Godard that I was reading only yesterday, and he's bemoaning the way that art has become all about the titles. He says that, you know, and he calls it advertising. He said that titles have become advertising, so it's less about the thing and it's more about titles. And I quite like that tension between the two. I suppose that's something that's interesting to me. So the idea that things can be drawn out as a narrative, or playing again with fictions, you know, and a lot of, just very quickly, is a lot of things that, you know, I think about, I pick up in a very kind of serendipitous way, like accidentally I come across something that's really constantly on my mind at the moment as a new piece of work, which has been going on for about 3 years, is a thing called Croatoan. And I don't know if you've ever heard of that, but it was like, this was an island in the sort of near in the South Seas that was occupied by the English, and it was in the 1700s. And so they kind of decided to set up, you know, camp there. They started to run out of food provisions, and so a number of people got on a ship, went back to England, and then got caught up in a war, which I can't remember which one it was. It may have been with the Spanish. And they ended up returning 6 years later. But when they returned 6 years later, all that was left was a tree with carved into the tree. Nobody around, was Croatoan. And this was also the last diary entry from Edgar Allan Poe, and also Amelia Earhart as well, before she disappeared, wrote Croatoan in her journal. So that kind of, I find those sort of things very, like, they're almost like Wikipedia moments, but I kind of, they're so weird and they stick with me that I just have to do something about it. And that's what that's what I'm working on kind of at the moment. So it's more about, so when subjects come, it's sort of serendipity. It's kind of stumbling into something rather than a deep connection. I find that connection with it, you know. But yeah, no, thanks. That's great.
any other thoughts or comments, or I don't know if anybody wants to bring anything else to the table? I'm happy to go on a bit longer if you want, but also I appreciate we've been on for an hour and a half, and you know, Zoom fatigue is real. No matter how engaging the subject matter, it is a thing, isn't it?
It's very true. Yeah, Zoom fatigue. I like that.
Thank you so much. Like everybody, I can't thank people that are not here, but I will do, like retrospectively on the Facebook group. Especially thanks, Marina and Paul. I think your presentations have both been
thank you.
Enlightening.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much.
So good to hear. So good to hear from artists. Yeah, because like I said before, you can look at websites or go to galleries, and it's finding out that kind of richness of process and the backstory. It's just so fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing.
Yeah, thank you for your comments, suggestions. Fantastic.
Yeah, thank you. This was very good, and also we'll develop a lot.
That's great to know as well, because I think that it can be a really valuable process for me anyway, to verbalize things that are maybe like just thoughts in your head. I mean, especially works in progress or stuff that maybe you haven't talked about before. I find a lot of value in talking about it, and so it's great that, you know, it's a value for everybody. So yeah, thank you.
Yeah, no, it's great. Really good. Okay.